Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Wednesday night Bible study. Glad that those of you who are here could be here with us, and we hope that those of you who are not here are joining us live on the internet. I know we're on Facebook and YouTube tonight, so we've got that working, and that's always good when we get those things working. A couple of announcements. Be sure and check in on Friday for our weekend Bible study. We will be doing that at some time during the day, Lord willing. And also would remind you about our church on Sunday. We want you to come and be a part of it, be here in person. They're saying that we're supposed to get just a tiny bit of snow on Saturday. I'm thankful we didn't get all the snow that we were supposed to on Monday, Sunday night, Monday. But I'm glad that we didn't, and I know some people wish we would have, but not me. I'm glad we didn't get it. But we do have the cold, and it is cold outside, and the wind has been brutal at times. And I'm thankful we have a nice place where we can get together and worship God and home. I have a lot of friends, family in Missouri that I've been watching, and they have really been suffering lately because of electric outages. There's some of them have gone a couple of days now without any electricity. And that's not the best situation to be in. I've been there before, but not in the wintertime. I've been there in the summertime, and it's not too much fun. In the winter, you have to have that for heat unless you've got a fireplace or a wood stove. And you say, well, what about gas? Well, gas, the thermostats run on electricity. And so you have to have electric to turn them off and on. So some of them have been very cold, but electric is starting to get restored to a lot of them. But we're glad that we haven't had that problem here. And of course, if you've been watching the news last night, this morning, you've seen all the wildfires out in Los Angeles. And by wildfires, I don't mean fires out in the jungle and the wilderness and the woods. I mean, this is devastating homes in Los Angeles itself and the suburbs there. And the high winds that they're having, some gusts of wind up to 100 miles an hour is fueling this and spreading it. And I saw a little bit last night on the news, and I thought, well, that's bad, but hopefully they'll get under control. But what I've seen today, they don't have it under control at all. And it's spread widely. So pray for those people out there. A lot of them losing homes and losing everything they have. So pray for them. I'm sure that they would appreciate God's intervention. Tonight we are going to be looking at Genesis chapter 37. We're not going to read the entire chapter, but we're going to be looking at it a little bit, and I want you to follow along with us. But before we get into that, let's go to the Lord in prayer. Heavenly Father, we do thank you for the opportunity we have to worship you together and study your word. And I pray that you'll help us as we study your word, as we look at this young man named Joseph, that you'll help us to learn from him and his brothers, both the good and the bad. Help us to learn in all that we do that we might glorify your name. Help us to be faithful to you, to serve you. And we ask it all in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, as I said, we're going to be looking at a boy named Joseph. The beginning of his story is found in Genesis chapter 37. We are not going to read the entire chapter. We're going to read most of it, but I'm going to take it in sections. I'm not going to read it all at once. I'm going to read a few verses, and then we'll talk about that. But there are a lot of lessons that can be learned from Joseph and his interaction with his father, with his brothers. And it's going to take us a few weeks to cover all that I want to cover about Joseph. And so tonight's kind of the introduction to what's going on with Joseph. And as we get into it, we'll see how that God worked in his life And one thing that I want to mention at the beginning of this, and I want you to remember all the way through the study of Joseph, and that's this. All of the things that were happening may not have been good things. They may not have been things that we should celebrate or we should copy. But God took all of the things that happened and used them to make His will be done. To bless the nation and bless all of us through that. So we'll see more of that later on as we get into it. But it's going to take us a few weeks to get into it. But we're going to give the foundation. This is basically the foundation for the story of Joseph and what happens in his life and how God uses him, how God blesses him, and how God works in him and the situation and the circumstances all around him. I'm going to skip verse 1 and we're going to start reading in verse 2. But let me encourage you, we're going to read most of the chapter. We're not going to read it all. But let me encourage you, read it. Read the whole chapter. Read it on your own. Let God speak to you through His Word. Take the lessons you can learn from Him as we go through here. So, verses 2 through 4. Let's read together. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his sons, because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a robe of many colors. You've all heard of Joseph's coat of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. This is basically the beginning of Joseph's story. As we've said, it's going to go on for quite a ways. And we're going to cover it it'll be a few weeks before we can cover all of it, because there's so much here that we can learn from. But as we remember, as we read this and as we think of Joseph, we need to remember, yes, he was a child of his father's old age. Joseph had 11 brothers and one sister. Joseph was the 10th child, 10th son, I should say. He was actually the 11th child, with his sister was in there. But Joseph was the 10th son. Only one was born after him, and that was his brother Benjamin. And at this point, Benjamin had not been born yet. So, as we get into this, think about this. Let me give you a little bit of background of why Jacob, Israel, had more than one wife. If you remember the story earlier in the book of Genesis about Jacob and his twin brother Esau, I'm not going to go through the whole story and tell you everything that happened. Let me encourage you to read it for yourselves. But as he was going through here, Jacob, or Israel, he's called both. Started out his name was Jacob, and later God changed his name to Israel. So if I call one or the other, you'll know who I'm talking about. It's the same person. He made his brother mad. He cheated his brother out of his inheritance, birthright. And so his brother out of that. And so his mother sent him off to her brother's house to escape, to get away so that his brother would not kill him. And so when he got there, he saw Rachel. And I don't know if it was love at first sight, but he fell in love with Rachel. And he decided that he wanted to marry her. And so he went to Laban and he asked him, and he said, I will work for you 7 years if you will let me marry your daughter Rachel. And he thought, that's not a bad deal. I mean, 7 years worth of hard labor I could get out of somebody for a daughter. Daughters were not looked at as being very important in those days, not like a son was. Now, we don't look at it that way today. We love our daughters just as much as our sons, but the daughters were looked as kind of a second-class person in those days. I don't agree with that, but that's the way it was then. And so he said, sure, I'll let you work 7 years. So he worked for him 7 years for the right to marry Rachel. And then on the wedding night, when they were married, he was tricked. And instead of marrying Rachel, he ended up marrying Leah unknowingly, her sister, her older sister. Well, the next day he realized what had happened. He discovered what had taken place. And he was angry. And he went to his father-in-law and he said, what have you done to me? You've cheated me. And his father-in-law made up the excuse, said, well, that's the way we do things around here. The older daughter has to get married first. And he said, well, I want to marry Rachel. I didn't want to marry Leah. I want Rachel. I want her. And he said, I'll tell you what, if you'll work for me another 7 years, after the honeymoon is over with Rachel, with Leah, I'll let you marry Rachel. But you'll have to agree to work with me another 7 years. And so he did. Rachel was Jacob's favorite wife. He was in love with her, not Leah, but he was legally married to both of them. And by the way, this is not endorsing polygamy in any way, shape, or form. This is the way a lot of things were done in those days, but it was not God's perfect will. And if you look at the lives of them, you'll see a rivalry that took place between the two wives. Even though they were sisters, they were rivals. And they each competed against each other, and they had jealousy toward each other, and they wanted... There's a whole dynamic of things that's caused when people do things outside of the way that God ordained them to be done. But that's what happened. So, Joseph was Rachel's first son. She did not have any children until Joseph was born. And as I said, he was the 10th son. He was the 11th son. Benjamin was the 12th. Let me give you the birth order of his brothers and his sister and who their mothers were. First of all came Reuben. That was Leah's son. Second son was named Simeon. That was also Leah's son. The third son was named Levi, who was also Leah's son. The fourth son was named Judah. He was Leah's son. Now, you can imagine what's going on here. Rachel's getting jealous. She's saying, hey, my sister's having all these boys. I can't have any children. I haven't had a child yet. And so she decided to do what some of the people in this pagan world were doing. And so she gave her handmaiden to him to have a son, to Jacob to have a son. And the fifth son was born, and his name was Dan. And he was from Bilhah, who was Rachel's handmaiden. Then he had another son by Bilhah, who was Rachel's handmaiden, named him Naphtali. The next son came along. Leah saw what was happening, and she wasn't having any more children, so she said, I'll give him my handmaiden too. And so she gave him her handmaiden Zilpah, and to them were born Gad, and the next son Asher. And then, lo and behold, Leah had another son. His name was Issachar. And then she had another son whose name was Zebulun. And then she had a daughter whose name was Dinah. Now, all of this time, Leah had been needling Rachel. Rachel was jealous. She had not had any children. And she had been praying and asking God to give her a son, give her a child. And finally, Rachel had a son, and that was Joseph. Later, Rachel has another son. His name was Benjamin, and she died in childbirth, giving birth to him. So these are all the brothers and the sister of Joseph. This is where it all fits in. So Joseph was the first son of Rachel, his favorite. And Joseph was his dad's favorite son of all. Now, I want us to look at a couple of things here. First of all, let me make sure I'm not skipping something here. Yeah. First of all, we see that Joseph was out in the field with his brothers, shepherding their sheep. And when they came back in, we don't know all the details. And because we don't know all the details, it's hard for us to make a judgment on whether he did what was right or wrong or whatever. But Joseph brought a bad report. He told his father that his brothers had been doing something they should not have been doing. We don't know what it was, but they were doing something. Well, nobody likes a tattletale, do they? His brothers got mad at him. Here he brought this bad report, told on his brothers. Now, we don't know. His father may have asked him point blank. And if that was the case, he had to tell him, because he was honest. He was truthful. He wasn't going to lie for him. And there's a good lesson in that. We shouldn't be made to lie for anybody. We should not lie for anybody. We may not have to tell on them, but we shouldn't lie with them. But his brothers were angry. Another lesson is that if we do what's right, we won't have to worry about getting in trouble, will we? His brothers did not do what was right. If they had been doing what was right, Joseph wouldn't have given a bad report. He would have said, hey, they've done a great job. They've been out there doing just what they were supposed to do. But apparently they've been doing something wrong. We don't know what they were doing. Well, the fact that Joseph was Israel's favorite son was very clear. His brothers knew that. He made no secret of that. He made Joseph a coat specially for him, a special coat, one of many colors, and gave it to him. He didn't do that for his brothers. He did it for him. Joseph was known by his brothers. His father let it be known that Joseph was the favorite of all of the sons. I know a family, that causes problems in a family. I know a family that had several sons, and their mother showed favoritism to one of the sons. And it wasn't that she didn't love them all, because she did. But this one was her favorite. Her brothers knew all about it. The rest of the family knew all about it. And they resented this one son because he was the favorite. They did not like it. They were jealous of this favorite child. And that's what happens in a family when a parent shows favoritism to one over the other. The others get upset. The others get jealous. And it causes problems. So we need to remember that in our lives. Maybe you were that son, or maybe you were that daughter. Maybe you weren't, and someone else in your family was. Remember what it made you feel like and what happened. So don't do that to your children. There's a whole lot about child rearing that we can learn here, but the Bible tells a lot about raising children and how that we should do and how that we should act. There are many, many good lessons in the Bible about that. God's taught us a lot. So yeah, well, let's go on. Let's read some more. In verse 5, and this is all in Genesis 37, verses 5 through 10. Now Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Hear this dream that I've dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf." His brothers said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us? Are you indeed to rule over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. Then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, "Behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars were bowing down to me." But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you?" And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind. Joseph had 2 dreams. The first dream he shared with his family. And he talked about being out in the field and they were gathering sheaves. Now we don't do that too much today. But what they were doing is they were gathering the crops together and they were bundling them up in stalks in bundles. And his stood there and all the others bowed down to his. His brothers knew what that meant. They knew what the interpretation of that dream was, that they would one day be bowing down to him. And they said, They didn't like that. I wouldn't like that either. If you came to me and told me you were going to be ruling over me and bossing me around, I wouldn't like it. Not if I was your brother. Especially, I wouldn't like it. Now, remember, he was 17 years old. I know when teenagers get to be 17, they think they know it all. They think they know everything. They think they're grown up and they've got it all figured out. Let me tell you, they don't. I've been there. I was 17 once. I thought I knew everything. I thought I knew how to act and what to do and what was. I thought I knew it all, but I didn't. There's a lot I've learned since then. I still don't know it all, by the way. But then he had another dream. Now you can imagine if you're 17 years old and you have these 2 dreams. The second dream was that the sun and the moon and 11 stars were all bowing down to him. They knew what the interpretation of this was too. That his mother and his father and his brothers would all be bowing down to him one day. That didn't sit very well with them. That second dream, the first dream was bad enough, but that second dream was even worse. It caused them to hate him even more. Obviously, Think about their reaction. 10 older brothers, and even a father and mother, and you telling them that one day you're going to be bossing them around? You're going to be ruling over them? They're going to be bowing down to you? And if you happen to be one of those older brothers, I wouldn't be too happy about that either. Obviously, they would be angry. Obviously, they would be jealous. Obviously, they want to put him in his place. Put him down where he belongs. He's just a kid. He's just a little one. We're all older. We're all bigger. We're all better. We're all smarter. Put him down. Put him in his place. This dream caused them to hate him even more. And you'll notice that anger, hatred, jealousy, if it's allowed to go on in a person's life, it will cause them to do things that they know are wrong, that they know are sin. At the very least, it will cause them to have attitudes that are unhealthy and sinful. We cannot allow anger, hatred, jealousy to live in our lives. It's easy for us to be jealous of other people, to be envious of what someone else has or the position they're in or whatever it is, especially if it's a brother or sister. We can't do that. We can't allow it to go on in our lives. We've got to get rid of it. Look at Joseph's father's reaction. He rebuked him. Joseph's father looked at this as being apparently disrespectful. And he should have more respect for his brothers. And he should definitely have more respect for his father and his mother. But you also notice that his father kept it in the back of his mind. He kept thinking about it. He didn't forget it. He could have just put it aside and forget that and go on, but he didn't. He remembered it. Let's read verses 18 through 23. We're skipping a few verses here. So, they saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. Now, this is his brothers. And Joseph coming. They saw him coming. I imagine it was easy to see him with that coat of many colors. They conspired against him to kill him. Verse 19. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams. But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood. Throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hand to restore him to his father." So Joseph came to his brothers. They stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, and they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty and there was no water in it. Now I'm told that another word for pit like this was a cistern. If you know what a cistern is, a cistern is a pit that's dug to hold water. And in dry areas, dry countries, dry places like that, they would dig a pit to hold water. And when the rain came, it would let it fill up with water and it would hold water there so they would have water later on. Well, this one was dry. So they threw him in there and left him. Now, Reuben, I think, realized that what they were about to do was wrong, and he thought, "I'm going to stop it." We don't know what his motive was. His motive might have been to get in good with his daddy because he was going to save his brother. make him look better. We don't know. May not have been. But if you remember what I said jealousy will cause you to do things you know you shouldn't do. That's what happened. His brothers saw him coming. He was a long way off, but they were also a long way from home. They were off in a place where no one could see them. No one could know what was happening. They could do all of this, and they saw him coming, and they thought, let's get rid of him once and for all. Let's put an end to these dreams that he has. So they decided what we're going to do is we're going to kill him. And we're going to make up a story. We're going to say that a wild animal attacked him and ate him up. And he's all gone. They knew that what they were about to do was wrong. It was sin. But their jealousy and their hatred motivated them to go ahead and do what was wrong. Folks, jealousy and hatred will motivate you to do things that you know you should not do. It'll make you do things you shouldn't do. And it did them. Now, the oldest brother, the firstborn of the whole bunch, Reuben, realized that what they were about to do was wrong, and he looked for a way to save Joseph's life and take him back to their father. Like I said, we don't know what his motives were. The Bible does not tell us. It's possible that he may have thought, I'm going to get in good with my dad. I'm going to look like a hero to him and make my brothers look bad in his eyes. We don't know. It could be that he just realized what they were doing was wrong. They shouldn't be doing it. He was trying to figure out a way to spare Joseph's life and to save him. So he said, guys, this is wrong. We cannot kill him. Don't kill him. Don't kill him. Here, let's just throw him in this pit. Before we do something wrong, we need to think about the consequences. And that's what we need to do. We need to think about the consequences of what we're about to do. When we are tempted to do something wrong, there are always bad consequences that come with it. We need to think about what those consequences are, who it's going to hurt. We think, oh, it's just going to hurt me. No, it always hurts other people. We'll look at that in a minute. Verses 25 through 28. Apparently, Reuben had to go somewhere. He went off. And when the rest of the brothers sat down to eat, they looked up and they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, what profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. And his brothers listened to him. Then Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. We don't know why Reuben had to leave, but he had to leave for a little while. While he was gone, they looked up and, hey, there's a caravan of traders. They're coming through. They're on their way to Egypt. I've got an idea. Why should we kill him? Why not, as the saying goes, kill two birds with one stone? Instead of killing him, we can still get rid of him by selling him to these traders. They're going to Egypt. We will sell him as a slave, and then we won't be guilty of killing him. If he dies as a slave, if he dies when he gets wherever they're to Egypt, wherever they're going, or on the way, then so be it. We didn't kill him. And at the same time, we can make a little money. We'll get 20 pieces of silver. And we can divide the money up. It'll make our pockets a little better. Let's just do both. The devil will always make sure that there are opportunities for us to sin. He will always put temptation in front of us. I like what 1 Corinthians 10:13 says, though. It says, "No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and He will not let you be tempted beyond your ability, but with the temptation, He will also provide the way of escape that you may be able to endure it." We may be tempted to do a whole lot of things, maybe because of anger, maybe because of jealousy, but we do not have to give in to those temptations. Whatever temptation the devil puts in our path, he will make a way out of it. Sometimes we don't see the way out because we are not looking for it, but it's there. God will make it so we do not have to give in to any temptations. Follow Him. Verses 29 through 33. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not in the pit, he tore his clothes and returned to his brothers and said, "The boy is gone, and where shall I go?" Then they took Joseph's robe and slaughtered a goat and dipped the robe in the blood. They sent the robe of many colors and brought it to their father and said, "This we found. Please identify whether it's your son's robe or not." And he identified it and said, "It is my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him. Joseph is without a doubt torn in pieces." When Reuben got back to the family, to the brothers, Joseph was gone. And when he saw him gone, he realized that there was nothing further he could do. He tore his robe. He showed signs of mourning. It was not the way he wanted things to happen. He knew what they'd done was wrong. But he thought, well, we've got to go through the deception. We've got to cover up the sin that we've done now. We've got to hide it. So they made up a story. They took Joseph's coat, and I'm sure they ripped it, tore it in spots, did things to it. They killed the goat. They dipped it in the goat's blood, made sure that there was blood all over it so it would look like he had died. And they made up a lie to go with it. You'll notice how one sin usually leads you to another, and then another, and then another. I've noticed this many times. You've probably heard it from other people. You tell one lie, and you have to tell another one to make up for that lie, and then you have to tell another one to make up for that one. And after a while, you've told so many lies, you don't even remember which one you told first. Sometimes you don't even remember what the truth is. You've told so many lies. One sin usually leads to another. They told their father. They said, "Is this his coat? Are you sure?" Well, the conclusion was that a wild animal must have devoured him, which is what their lie was they'd made up to begin with. But you also notice that it broke their father's heart. He wept, he mourned for a long time after that. He was hurt, greatly hurt. A lot of people say, well, this sin's not going to hurt anybody else. It's just me. It's not true. It is not true. It always hurts somebody else. Some way, some shape, somehow. Sin always hurts more than one person. Verse 36, and we'll finish with this. Meanwhile, the Midians had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. You know what this means? What this last verse put in here on this chapter means? It means this: there's more to the story to come. This is just the beginning. And it's almost like God is saying, just wait and see what happens next. Wait and see what I'm about to do. Wait and see how all of these things are just happen to fit into my plan. You see, God did not make the brothers sell Joseph into captivity. But God did give Joseph the dreams. God did not make the brothers sell him. But God used that to further his will. Now, you probably know the rest of the story. And I'm not going to tell you the rest of the story tonight. But just let me say this. Later on, they discovered Joseph's not dead. And they discovered in a way they never would have thought. Never would have dreamed. But Joseph was doing what was right. And God used that for his purposes. So, I hope, as we look at this, like I said, this story is basically the foundation for the story of Joseph and the rest of his life. So I hope you've listened and learned from this, and I hope that you take the lessons that are here. Learn that it never pays to do what's wrong. We always need to do what's right. We may suffer for it sometime by the people around us, but it always pays to do what's right. Follow God. Let's be dismissed in prayer. Father, we do thank you for this example that you've given us of Joseph and the story of what all happened to him in his life and how that it wasn't all good. But as we read the rest of the story, we see how you take even the bad things and work them out for the good. So help us to be faithful to you, obedient to you, to do your will. And we ask it in Jesus' name.